All right, so here we are. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We're over here with our Bruce Simon, Tom Kraft, Mark Badger, and Rand Hoppy, and it's the Jack Kirby Museum's 3 Days for 103. It's our second guest event. We're expecting Steve Sherman to show up at some point. He said he would not be able to be here at the beginning, so that's something that we're crossing our fingers and looking forward to.
Yeah,
but
we call him lightnings because he's always on time.
That's right. Yeah.
So we're gonna just spend an hour making fun of Steve, right?
We could do that.
We, not a bad idea. I'll just add that we are going out to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter all at the same time. There are, if you're watching, you can make comments and into the chats on those various services, and we will see them, and we will do our best to read them and
present them at the end.
At the end, we'll leave maybe we'll at 20 minutes of we'll start addressing some of the comments in the chat stream. So that's all I have to say. Welcome. So what's up with you guys? Okay. Yeah, take it away. What's up?
Take it away. Get me a wheelbarrow and we'll take it away. Well, what we usually do with these things is Mark puts together a fabulous slideshow, and he has a number of different ones. Which one are we looking at today, Mark?
We're doing Kirby Apocalypse. We're doing the bio of Jack with, since you and Steve are better at doing the bio than me because I wander all over the universe and I talk about all the pictures and diagrams. This is a representation of what we did in San Diego last year, I guess.
Yes.
Because there wasn't a San Diego this year. So
are we going to, okay. Well, what we're looking at now is Jack's famous spread from Street Code, which was like his last major work. An autobiographical piece, and this is a double-page spread as his neighborhood as he saw it at the time.
Yeah, this is a pretty close approximation of what Manhattan and the Lower East Side looked like in 103 years ago.
One of the things about that one that I really like was that it, as part of the story, because there's this whole street fight going on with the kids, that Jack's note at the bottom was, fight spills out onto street, and that's what he presents, is the
yeah, there's just a little bit of a fight down in that lower left hand. Yeah. Just a little bit of the crashing and the hectic.
Well, there's so much going on in this piece. One of my favorite parts of it is in the lower left. You see a guy who's eating an apple and looking straight ahead, and garbage is about to land on his head.
Yes.
Comes out of the window.
That's right.
And you got the cop like yelling at him, "Don't throw that stuff out the window."
Yeah, it's so great, and New York looks so much different these days. But the first time I went to New York was in 1971 for one of the big cons there, and I got off at Port Authority, and it was still surrounded by buildings that looked like that.
Yeah.
And they had laundry hanging from building to building, and it was just everything that I believed New York to look at. And years later, it's all wiped clean. So,
yeah,
except for the tenement museum,
right?
Notoriously, this is a story. This is from Street Code 2, and Jack was short and he fought. He was a street gang kid, and this was a story about fighting on the streets, and that kind of runs through his work up to the end, probably. So we'll talk a little bit more about the art on these. The next page is the way Jack sort of started drawing. This is it's later than the 30s.
Oh, it's the Boy Explorers from 1946.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And it's an unfinished job.
It's it's a penciled page where someone, I don't know if it was Jack, he would typically either have somebody do the outlines, and he would go back in with the brush.
Right.
But that is like pure Kirby drawing before the brushwork is laid in. It's a pretty rare example of that.
All right. Here comes the man of the hour. Steve, are you there? Can you hear us?
I'm here.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, boys.
Hey.
Hello, Bella.
Hey, Steve.
Hey.
We're on to Captain America. Do you know who Captain America was? Were you there when Jack created this?
I was. I was.
One of probably Jack's more famous creations. This is the first issue of Cap, which he did before he went into the army, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from what I understand, and it's so fascinating that a lot of this history is being dug up, that that it's been said that they created this on spec and then brought it to Martin Goodman, and this is what I'm hearing at the moment, instead of them being on staff at Marvel, because both of them were working at Fox before they came to Timely.
Right.
Do you have know anything about that, Steve?
No, I think you're right. That's what I've been reading, is that they put the whole thing together outside of Marvel and just brought it to Goodman and showed it to him, and he said, okay.
And that's why they got nervous later and wanted them to sign retroactive assign copyrights to Marvel, because they were afraid that maybe they didn't own Captain America.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Well, they kind of do now. So, Steve, do you want to tell about the stories about the letters and phone calls they were getting up at Timely about Cap, who came out before Pearl Harbor while we were still out of the war?
Well,
go ahead.
Go on. No, you go. Well, there was a huge German, what do they call it, bunt, like a bunt cake, huge German boot in New York City. You know, I think you've seen the pictures on Facebook of these, these meetings in these huge halls of all these people who are pro-Germany.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden, and they filled it. Everybody going, Heil Hitler in the U.S., so people getting a little shaky. So the comic book comes out with him, punching Hitler in the face, and these Germans are all like, ugh. So they're going, they look up Marvel and they start calling Timely, and they start, calling up. Somehow they got Jack and Joe's number, and they go, we'll meet you on the corner. And Jack says, God, my pleasure. Come on, bring it on. Nobody ever showed up.
No.
They did get a call, I think, from Mayor LaGuardia, who offered them police protection.
Yes.
Which is hard to believe, nowadays. Who would offer some comic book guy police protection?
Right. That's a good point.
No, we have the comic book.
It caused a big stir. Hard to believe that a comic book would do that, but yeah, it caused a lot of hubbub.
Bub.
But yeah, it was a big deal. And of course, they only did 10 issues.
Right.
Do you guys know if Jack joined before Pearl Harbor or after Pearl Harbor?
Oh no,
After.
he didn't. He didn't. What
he was drafted?
He was drafted. But Simon and Kirby had left Timely. They were promised profit sharing, and they didn't get it, and they moved to DC. And started, working for them, doing Sandman, Manhunter, The Boy Commandos, all of that. And by that time, the war had started, and Jack and Joe Simon knew that they were going in the service. DC said, pile up as much work as you can. And they produced, covers, stacks of covers, tons of stories. They brought in other people to help them. As a matter of fact, one of Gil Kane's earliest jobs was, helping them turn out these pages. So when Jack and Joe went into the services, DC would have stuff to continue printing. So, and the stuff they did lasted well into 1944.
So, so Jack obviously joined the army here, and I think everybody knows that being in World War II was probably the biggest formative experience of his life, or second most formative
No,
after. I think there's Lower East Side, the war, and Roz that seem to me like the three keystones of Jack's life, and probably having kids, but you could probably put kids under Roz, his wife. So
the other thing, Mark, the other thing is, I asked Jack once. I said, "Well, why did you go in the army? Why didn't you do what everybody else did and just, get a desk job somewhere in the U.S.?" And he said, "I was stupid."
It's true. He could have got himself a cushy job in the Signal Corps, turning out comics and materials. I mean, Stan Lee spent the whole war doing writing and producing posters and stuff like that. And so a lot of people did. Will Eisner, how many cartoonists wound up working, not slogging in the mud.
But what would
Jack
his comics have been afterwards? Would there have been a New Gods and Fourth World if he didn't go into the army?
No, well, don't forget too that going in the army was the first time Jack was out of New York. I mean, he had never left. I mean, he had gone, upstate because they had friends who lived up, or family who lived up there. Yeah, the Catskills, but he'd never been out of New York City proper, really. And this was the first time he'd been south when he went to training camp. So yeah, it was a rude awakening, as we say.
Yeah. For him and millions of other people who, I mean, Americans didn't really travel before then, and especially not to Europe.
Right.
After the war, soldiers wanted to take their families to Europe to show them where they had been. I mean, that really was really broadened the worldview of America, which, remember, wanted to stay out of the war until Pearl Harbor.
So this is one of the things you'll always hear from all the writers who write about Jack, is that Jack sat down and he just did everything instinctively. And this is the art school student in me going, no. Even at the beginning of Jack's career with the Boy Commandos, he's very clearly using really traditional art form of foreground, middle ground, and background, and breaking everything up into big shapes and establishing these great spaces that are one of the things that make Jack's comics so dynamic. It's not just the character design. It's not just the storytelling. It's this unity of everything. And the fact that Jack could draw a whole world in big blocky shapes is kind of one of the things that continues to amaze me about his work. That's what you get to do. You get to take over when you do the slideshow.
No, that's okay. Can we go back to that page, though? I mean,
sure.
Where?
Oh, you want the
Well, we're looking at the schematics you made of these two pages, correct? Boy Commando pages. Okay,
Yes.
Now let's go back. Now that we know what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay. It has everything Mark says, and Jack's patented person looking at you and addressing you and pointing into the background. I mean, that's like probably his most ubiquitous trademark. So
even more than that,
Yeah,
but
and it's a great storytelling device, and nobody uses it anymore.
Yeah, it really pulls you in.
It just sucks you into the story.
Yeah.
So this jumps all the way to the 50s, I guess, with Boys Ranch. And you get a sense of Jack's brush inking going over that line drawing and that big, we're going into adventure stories, and we're going to tell some rollicking adventure stories, and we're going to make it as dynamic as I possibly can.
And what's funny about, Boys Ranch was one of Jack's very favorite creations. he really threw himself into the writing and drawing of it, and it's amazing that people always associate Jack with superheroes, but until 1960, the majority of his work was done on genre work, like, westerns and war and romance and things like that. If you look at the page counts, he really did much more non-superhero material until Marvel.
And he actually would cite Mother Delilah from Boys Ranch, along with The Pact, as two of his favorite stories from his career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, this is great. Stuntman. This is from right after the war, right when Simon and Kirby came back from war. They hooked up with a couple different companies. They continued to produce Boy Commandos for DC, but they worked for Harvey and Hillman and a couple other outfits, and they really went to town on the Stuntman series and started doing, these really incredibly elaborate, much more than even Captain America, double-page spreads.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, after the war, all the soldiers came back, and they stopped reading comic books. The number of comics on the stands was way up, but the readership went down, and these books were not successful, undeservedly so. So Stuntman,
And this is
last
probably-
of a couple of issues.
And the other thing is that I don't think there's a lot of double page spreads from everybody else, but Jack, there's some of those techniques of like the floating heads, the double page spread, the big logos, and all the big diagonals going on it. He just uses those throughout his career and keeps on working on them and just fine tunes them.
And I think almost all of them were in the center of the comic.
Well, but the starting of the stories
days.
couldn't make it. Yeah, something like this,
Yeah.
this double page spread from Boys Ranch obviously had to be in the center of the comic because they didn't have control over where ad placement was the way they do now.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know what they were getting into. This is pretty, classic Jack early fight scene that he's going to revisit later in the New Gods, even, which somebody in, I think, the tomorrow's the Jack Kirby book, the Jack Kirby Collector puts out, mentioned that this parallels the New Gods page, which we'll see later, that he keeps going. I just don't remember who wrote about it. And here's some of the war stories from the 50s.
Oh boy, Foxhole.
Which is it's from Foxhole. It's just more great brush inking.
Mm-hmm. And the story of Foxhole is that it was purportedly all produced by people who had been in the services. So they really, made an effort to make it as realistic as they can within the parameters of a comic book. So, and I'm sure Jack enjoyed the hell out of doing these. So,
this is to credit Trina Robbins. She told a story about how she was on some panel where Jack proclaimed himself a feminist, which he kind of was, given how much he respected his wife for those times. But his reason for that was that when they were in Italy, there was a sniper that was shooting at them, and it turned out to be a woman up in a tree, I think. You have to hear this from Trina. Yeah. I don't quite remember it. And Jack stopped everybody else from killing the woman because she was a gal, and you couldn't kill gals. That wouldn't be right. And let the girl go. And I think this is a little much of a play on that. For that, I'm
the booby trap story. Yeah.
Yeah. These really need to be reprinted.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So here's that page, which not in color breaks down into lots of crosshatch and lots of just gorgeous brush inking to just wailing on the page practically with that brush.
Did Jack have somebody somebody's asking if Jack inked that. I think he did, didn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's almost, boy, as an artist, I can't even imagine somebody else inking, and getting that vigorous with somebody's work, with all those gorgeous foliage in the top right panel. And then here's my breakdown once again of the foreground, middle ground, background thing. One of the things about the depth, if you look at these guys along here, most people will make a big flat shape along the top of everybody stacked up. Jack's got his guy in the foreground helmet, and then each one of these is progressively going back further and further into space till you have this little guy back here, and then you have these three guys. All of this gives you this much bigger sense of how the space is working, and that's another thing that Jack was just the best at, was establishing that kind of moving from a foreground to the background and having that space set up in almost all of his work.
But also,
it's sort of
like the foreground looks like it takes your eye through every single panel. It's all designed to guide the reader through the panels, basically. The angles.
Yeah,
and so forth.
he's just. I did some Dr. Doom sketches as a commission a couple weeks ago, and I started reading Fantastic Four, looking for Dr. Doom photos, just drawings to swipe, and I just got sucked into the story because of this. Like I'm reading these late 90s issues of Fantastic Four and going, why am I reading this? I know all these stories. I've read all these stories before. I've got other things to do. I should be reading these. And Jack just sucks you in.
Yeah.
He's just amazing at that. And as Bruce was saying, Jack did a buttload of love stories.
Well, they created the love comic. I mean, the romance comics.
Yeah.
Talk about single-handedly creating an entire genre of comics. They did it. Young romance comics. Those were close to million-selling comics, and they had made sure they had profit sharing on those. So after the war, that bought their houses. These comics, and they're beautifully written, and it's amazing going from total action comics into these intensely personal stories. If you looked at at where these came from, they were an offshoot of the romance pulps that would tell stories of young romance and this and that, but they were prose, like the pulp science fiction and the pulp westerns. There was also the pulp romance magazines, and so the comics were an offshoot from that. But Jack had no precedent for this. He pretty much created it out of his head. So it's amazing.
I like to say that the romance comics is what helped them move to the suburbs.
Exactly. That bought their houses on Long Island. They for the first time they were actually making big money.
Yeah. And we're going to do a dramatic.
There's a lot of dialogue.
Yeah. We're going to do a dramatic reading of Different on Sunday, just a little promo for another event. So
yes.
That'll be something fun.
You're going to do like a radio show version?
Yeah, we're going to show the panels, and we've got some people doing reading, running through the lines. And we also have Sydney Heifler, a romance comic scholar, joining us on Sunday as well. So
you need somebody to play an organ in the background.
We wanted to, but we didn't. We really did.
And now for another episode of Jack's Other Wife.
That's right. Brought to you by Does.
We're gonna get to the really good stuff. We're gonna get through all of this. We're gonna have to crank up this speed.
Oh,
okay.
I'm gonna start moving us along with a faster clip. Here we go into some of the stuff. This is Marvel. He's going back to Marvel. His comics started dying. He ends up back at Marvel doing some stuff, and then there's of course, is it Sky Masters?
Yeah, that's
The Three Rocketeers, and that's inked by Wally Wood, right?
No, that's inked by Marvin Stein.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Space Busters.
Well, it's for the Harvey book, the Three Rocketeers or Blast Off, or it had a bunch of titles. So, but that's a Martin Stein page. Now,
and then we begin the sort of really the start of the Marvel universe with everything from the cowboy stuff with Rawhide Kid, where you get a sort of a patented Kirby action page in a gunfight too. Kind of thing you can only do in comics. And of course, on the right is an early Thor page with the gray gargoyle, who everything he touches turns to stone, so he can't grab flagpoles and fall off of flagpoles.
that's quite a power.
Yeah, turning everything to stone's cool. One of my favorite covers from when I was a kid is Captain America, of course, and sort of just a nightmare issue. This isn't the issue that was between the Steranko's issues, was it?
That's the album.
This is the Dr. Faustus issue, yeah. Okay.
Now, it's funny because back in the 60s, where the character is now is obviously, they've had so many different permutations of Captain America. But in the 60s, we had PTSD after he was revived from the ice flow. And he was having World War II flashbacks all the time and was actually kind of unstable here and there. And he carried the guilt of losing Bucky, and he was really kind of a man out of time who got frozen in the mid-40s and woke up in the mid-60s. And that's a very interesting side of the character that disappeared in time, So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think, PTSD wasn't even talked about in those
Shell
days.
shock.
Yeah, it was shell shock, but, having a couple uncles who were at Pearl Harbor, they lived into their 90s. They never talked about it. It wasn't something you did. They were just Vermont farmers. They were just there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's that guy, Black Panther, who, now wasn't it, who's the guy who directed it? That Oakland guy? Let's represent Oakland a little bit, who created the Black Panther. Well, no, he didn't. Jack created the Black Panther. He did a movie. Much credit to him for doing the movie. But Jack's the guy who created the Black Panther. And this is one of the stories from when he appeared with Captain America. And this is just Cap beating this crap out of some Nazis in that Captain America stuff.
I'll tell you something really quick about the Black Panther. When we were at San Diego last year, I think you were with me, Mark, and we were outside the convention, and there was a man there who had a perfect Black Panther outfit from the movie, and he had a line of kids, black kids, white kids, all sorts of kids, and they were just like absolutely busting to have their picture taken and to be next to the Black Panther. And I said,
cool.
Jack would have just gone out of his mind with happiness to see that. It's such a shame. He would have just loved it.
Yeah. No, I think we often forget that Jews were not welcomed in America real well back in the 40s and the 50s. I mean, my dad was Armenian and his name was Bagdasarian, and the reason I'm Badger is that Armenians weren't welcomed any more than Jews.
Oh, I'm Seminovich.
Bagdasarian, did your dad create the Chipmunks?
No, my dad had nothing to do with the Chipmunks. It's an ongoing question that it always happens when it comes out in comics.
That's too bad.
I
would have been a rich man.
I would have been a rich man. Here's some more art analysis for you, where you get this is a Cap panel with Frank Giacoya inks, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
And it's funny because the line drawing's still the basic stuff, 20 years later, he's still using that line drawing for the basic layout of his figures. And the brown blocking on the right is just sort of a traditional way that you're supposed to approach figures. But then when you transfer it into Jack's language in the last panel, you see how much that simplification was driving almost everything Jack was doing at this point. Some of that's on speed, and some of it's also on just visual force of, you get a much more stronger and dynamic thing if you simplify out the figures and give a strong gesture into it. And Jack's just the master of this. I'm not sure how much more you can say about the foundation of Jack's work being the strongest, best drawing that goes on in comics to this day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, someone might want to argue with me, but screw it. I know more than you.
There you go.
I look at more comic books than you do. And here's sort of one of the most swiped pages in comics for you. On the left, is that Fighting American?
It's Fighting American.
The old
These
guys
are about
know
12
this.
years apart.
Yeah, these are 12 years apart. And this is that simplification and the power of what's going on in Marvel, where you get, the drawing's great on the Fighting America, and then you get to the cap, and the actual, figurative representation may not be as great. But Jack's beginning to reduce everything down to arcs, and gestures, and you just get this really powerful. It's a 9-panel page. This, could be laid over with a Alan Moore long, lengthy script. And
Stan got paid for writing the caption, which meant,
Yeah.
I believe, said, let's just sit back and watch this. So.
Yeah, which he should have said more often.
Yeah.
And you take it, and here's one more, art geek breaking down the arcs for you to see how the arcs are what's driving all of this, and how the figures are just fitting into those shapes and making this, go on. And I think almost every comic book artist at some time or other has tried to swipe this page. We all fail. Just it just never works as well as what Jack was doing, from the blowing up Batroc and everything.
No, you can copy the outward ticks, but you can't copy the thinking behind it.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure there's the second Cap movie with Batroc in it, where there's a big long fight scene that they spend about 30 minutes and 2 stuntmen going at it, and it's still not as cool as this page. I'm sorry, comics are just cooler than movies.
That's
in
right.
my humble opinion. And here's a little bit of more Thor, just because it's a great. Jack never really slacked very much when he did stuff. And when he went into his full-page spreads, there's just as much action as you can cram into that page. Which, I kind of looking at the Thor page, I'm going, damn, I wish I'd done a foreground, middle ground, background breakdown into that. Because there's just, it's so hectic, but it's, with the coloring and breaking down the spaces, you get it.
It's great.
So
and that splash, you can see, you actually have a visceral feeling of Thor coming at you.
Yeah.
And you're up in the air with them.
Or you get his hammer coming at you,
Right.
in this cover with Magog, it's like, so have they done Magog in the movies yet? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
No,
I don't
Because
think
I know
they've gotten to that yet.
they've done Ego the Living Planet, and it wasn't as cool as this.
nope.
Ego's the Living Planet on the right.
Oh, did they do that in the movie? I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, I think.
Okay. This is some of Jack's absolutely most visionary writing, was the High Evolutionary and all of that whole story right there. But now we're off to the Black Panther.
And we go back to, this is actually the first story that This isn't the first story that introduces the Black Panther,
Yes.
is it?
Mhm.
Or it is.
That's
I saw the Wyatt Wingfoot, and I'm going, wait, what? So he had a nice little cape at the beginning. And once again, it's like the one thing about Jack that I love is that his foreground is the Black Panther and that whatever it's the thing he's standing on, and the FF is down there at the bottom. And there's actually a threat to the FF in the Black Panther. We know he's a good guy. We know even now that he's not going to do any harm to him. Back then, nobody had seen the Black Panther. He was just this ominous black figure. And so there was that story being set up to have something going on in characters. And that kind of thing of setting up a story in pictures doesn't happen very much in modern Marvel comics. They sit around and talk a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so. And then the other side of that for me is I love that Jack's this family guy who can introduce Franklin, and it's a really important thing to him that he takes all this lovely time to introduce Franklin. Absolutely. And so we go from big epic adventure to little babies.
And
your heart's got to melt for him.
At first, Ben was like, babies, they're a bother. And then I believe this is the page where they said they gave the baby the middle name Benjamin.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's why he's crying. That's a very Hamish moment in a comic book. I mean, you never saw that in Superman or Batman. Right. I mean, that is a true family kind of a moment. I mean, that's how he transcended the form. So something you can actually relate to. Say, oh, I could see that.
And this is some of the late stuff for Fantastic Four as Jack was beginning to burn out at Marvel and had sort of decided not to create anything more new from them. And Thing is captured on a planet that's run by 30s mobsters in a science fiction setting. And it's just, every once in a while Jack would come back to the 30 mobsters because you're doing comics, you might as well relive your childhood. And Jack was a big fan of those movies, those 30s and 40s mobster movies when he was a kid.
Right. And he had, this is right about the time that famous Star Trek episode happened where the Star Trek crew were in the 30s. And I bet Jack saw that episode and said, that's a damn good idea. Because, when he was tailing off on FF and not creating new villains and new characters, but he did bring in things that he saw. He did The Prisoner, right? In 3 issues. He did this thing with the gangsters for 2 issues. He brought back the creature from the Black Lagoon. He just pulled all of this stuff out of the zeitgeist, because he was damned if he was going to create any more zillion-dollar characters for them at that point.
And don't forget, he was creating characters because it was at this point that he was doing the New Gods and Mr. Miracle and all those presentations that he had planned to give to Marvel if they had, renewed a contract to, his satisfaction. But, so he was creating new stuff. He just wasn't putting it in the books because he didn't want them to have. Well, Roz didn't want them to happen. She told it because he would have put it in, but she said, no, you don't. You don't put that stuff. Don't give him this. Don't give him that.
Yeah.
Somewhere in all of this, Jack did some illustrations for Pro Magazine on what football was going to look like in 2020, I guess.
Magazine,
so this is what football is going to look like if it ever starts up again. It's going to look just like this. It probably wasn't actually 2020, but it was just in the future. But I'd go to this football game.
Yeah.
Steve, were you around when Jack was working on this stuff? Do you have any memory of it at all? The
he did it because there was a guy who was, I don't know if he lived in the neighborhood or Jack knew him somehow, but he was in charge of the NFL magazine, and he asked Jack to do this. He just said, could you, draw up what the future of football would be?
Yeah.
Or not. I don't even know if he told him that. He just said, "Can you, do something for us?" So Jack said, "Sure." So yeah, that's how that came about.
There was a bunch of stuff, right? There were those character designs and
There's 4. I think there was a couple more big illustrations like
There were.
this.
There were.
I have vague memories of seeing that when I was a kid, and I might have already been into Barry Smith, and I thought Jack Kirby's so old-fashioned and not as cool as Barry
Smith. Diptych, with Fran Tarkenton as the Viking football warrior and the businessman.
Absolutely.
I just love that Jack would just take all of this stuff and form it into his work,
Yeah.
What year was that?
Here's one of those.
Would you say, what was it, like 72, 73, 74? The football stuff?
Sounds sort of right to me.
72.
I don't know. Steve, do you have any idea?
Looks like Mike
I'm bad at
Inking.
dates. Yeah, I'm sure it was.
It looks like Royer inking, you think?
Does to me.
Does to me.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was his first character sketch. It doesn't look like a first sketch for Darkseid.
No,
this is the
he looked
fourth
totally
one.
different the first sketch.
Yeah.
He had ears.
Right.
Yeah.
I
So
think
Jack's 52 at this point. I saw somebody on the internet saying Jack started all this at 52.
Well, I was saying it's Jack's 103rd birthday today. And when Steve and I met him in 1969, that means he was 52.
Wow.
And that's considerably younger than I and Steve are right now. A little younger than maybe of you guys.
It's even younger than me.
It's amazing. And it's humbling because he was at the very peak of his power, and I find it impossible to think that was 51 years later. It's now.
And here's Jack, the nuts comic book guy who. This is from Jimmy Olsen. It's inked by Vince Coletta.
First issue.
And it's Jack's brings in the Newsboy Legion, those kid gangs. The kid gang from his kids, but it's their sons. So he's going back to that 40s, and he's got his science fiction car they're going to ride around in for the next 6 or 7 issues. The Whiz Wagon. Jack just layers up and makes as complex as humanly possible.
And who would design something that you would have to draw over and over and over again? And look like
complicated.
The Fantastic Car, the original one, was just like a bathtub they were all sitting in. And then they got the little fancier one, but this is completely out of control. It's great.
It's just this unleashed energy. He can't control himself. And the first page of the New Gods is he's starting into, the epic of his life, probably of, the old gods, aka Marvel's characters, all die off, and we're going on to a new universe.
Blitzkrieg 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's from the Pact. I mean, not the Pact. That's
New Gods.
From the Glory Boat.
Glory Boat,
right.
yeah.
And that's the Deep Six. It's a mutated whale that's attacking ships and yachts and stuff.
Yeah. And this is about the time that Mike Royer started inking Jack. And it's like, whoa, what a difference.
Yeah, this was just sort of like, it still amazes me that this is in a comic book and not up at the Modern or the Met or something, that this totally. I was about to say, this is one of Jack's best double page spreads ever. It probably is, but I feel like saying that on all of these pages about how good they are. We should give a shout out to Charles Hatfield, who put a show together a few years back in Southern California and put out a book called The Kirby Apocalypse, which a lot of this stuff is taken from. Yeah. It was a wonderful show to see all this stuff live and in person. And just, it has even more impact.
Can we head off into some questions sometime soon? Or
do we have any?
Sure.
Well, we have. Did Jack do the coloring on that NFL job from Charles Hatfield?
I don't think he. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't think he did.
Okay.
He might have.
It's pretty out there coloring though. It's a
Yeah.
little wild.
Yeah.
Everybody
I'd have
else
to-
and Jack's coloring.
If the original is colored with Dr. Martin dyes, then he did.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah, it
Well, I
definitely.
think-
Yeah, but
The original
Any
started
color
with
is-
8, so it might have been.
Yeah, because that
I'm
looked
pretty
like
sure
the printed
that's
version.
Doc Martens. Yeah, that looked like a printed version, but I would bet that's Doc Martens. It's got that brightness. That you
I believe
can
they
only
are.
get.
It was for sale a while back, I think, in Heritage, and it showed it all faded.
Oh, so
So then he did color it.
maybe it was like the, that NFL Pro actually handled the color separations pretty nicely.
Sure.
as opposed to,
Yeah, they might have actually gotten it scanned on a real honest-to-God camera and
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
I mean, the NFL even then had more money than most.
That's right.
These are just more pages from the New Gods, and this is. Oh, I'm spacing on the story
Pact.
name. Somebody.
Fact.
It's the Pact. It probably is his greatest story. I could go on about these pages forever, but we're getting kind of tight.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. It's cool.
And at the top, one of the best punches ever.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
That's a great punch.
Ram.
and it's just, and there's actually, it always amazes me how little, there's just that explosion just takes your breath away. And it's just one of the things I always miss when doing comics. Here's me being the art nerd again, going over the structure of the drawings.
Oh, look at that horse, Lonar.
Oh man.
This is just, and if you look at a real horse, it doesn't look like that, but it should.
It should.
It's
a
like,
demon
I
horse.
swear.
It's
It's
a
like
feral
the
horse.
best horse in art history and comics, and every artist will tell you how hard it is to draw horses, but I don't care. It's still cool as hell.
Yeah,
And
that's a horse to me. And interestingly, and I mentioned this before, in the New Gods, he would if he was short a couple pages or they needed a couple more because of a 25-cent format, he would just do these stories of these characters that were one-offs.
Yeah.
Of the New Gods, and you'd see them and you'd never see them again, like Lonar of New Genesis or Fastback was another. He had another, it's like he just threw them in. He just threw off these things like fireworks.
Yeah. And
And I
he could
just-
probably, if you wanted him to, he could have done a whole book on Thunderer.
Oh my
Just
God.
done a whole book on the horse.
It's a horse. Yeah.
He
yeah,
probably forgot
Yeah.
he existed as soon as he drew this. So
yeah. And I just want to point out that, to me, one of the great things about Kirby is he's got, his villain is who Darkseid is kind of a combination Richard Nixon, Adolf Hitler type, yelling at the forever people. And he has this frigging evil, awesome villain who does the afterlife, pinching Big Bear's nose.
that's a great.
It's just, who has your evil villain destroying the world who pinches people's noses?
Yeah.
It's just the awesomeness that is Jack.
Yeah, it gets away
As-
with it too.
This is not the best splash that ever, 2-page spread Jack ever did. That's a cool building, but it's not the best page. And here from that fight with
Oh, the female
the
fury.
boys. Yeah, this is the female Furies from the Boys Ranch stuff. This is Mr. Reed. This is female Furies from Mr. Miracle.
Thank
That goes back to the Boys Ranch double page spread. Where
It's in the women's
Jack just
locker room.
composes it out. The interesting thing about in that space of there it is. Somebody actually worked on this slideshow. So you can see that like Jack's got some poles going up and down to give you a frame, and that chair in the foreground there. So there's a little bit of the foreground. But the great thing about Jack, here's my breakdown of everything going on from the foreground in pink to the yellow middle ground to the lines in the background. So you can see that as the space of 20 years, 15 years, he's actually piled on these skills to arrange the stuff just a little bit better, just a little bit more dynamically, and just to keep the storytelling going. And I want to point out that all the characters in the background have character.
Yeah.
In that they're doing something and fiddling around with their weapons and making comments. And the main character in this that's being entered, coming into this room, is Big Barda. This tiny little figure way in the back.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not like, here she is. It's just this tiny little character who gets completely lost as she walks into the chaos. This is where modern coloring, which could break the planes down a little bit more, would have been really nice, that you can't do in the flat coloring with the 48 colors back then. Although all the airbrush would ruin it today.
Yeah. Charles Hatfield went out to the Heritage site and found the NFL image, and it is definitely faded.
So it's probably is Dr. Martin. So it probably is.
Yeah, that's
just
made to last.
Yeah.
A really nice demon page. 2 really nice demon pages.
What's interesting with the one on the right is that he doesn't have his claws on his hands.
Yeah, continuity stuff. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. No, he sure doesn't. Huh.
Yeah.
And so the New Gods dies. Jack gets to create a few more things for DC, among them the Demon, OMAC, Commandy. Yeah, we get into Commandy. There's Commandy that's a takeoff on Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
But Jack, of course, throws in a bunch of big sculptures to go in there, which is just this lovely thing.
Is this the Watergate issue? Is that or I'm not certain.
No.
Jack threw in politics in he had a Watergate issue of Command. He did all sorts of great stuff.
Yeah, that was later.
There was one magazine. I guess the DC ended up doing a Tales of the Mob. This is from the unpublished issue that Royer inked, but I guess it's available in book form now.
Yeah.
Thanks to be pulled out. This is just a great spread where Jack takes the foreground and does a dead body and does fabric and suits falling of a dead body and near computer cubist abstraction.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And here we go. Blah blah. I have a degree in art. I'm old. I'm somewhat educated. And Jack's work the fact that he can take this foreground, middle ground, background thing and just keep pushing it. So he's just got so much going on in his stories is just astonishing to me.
Steve will remember, and I'll tell this one real quick. We were at Royer's house one day out in Whittier, and he had a penciled Demon double-page spread on his board that he was getting ready to start on, and we're just standing there going like, "Isn't that incredible?" I don't even know how you're going to do this, how to ink this, Mike. He goes, "Oh, it's easy." He dips his brush in and loads it up and starts doing the outlining of the foreground figure, and we just gasp. I mean, the total courage it takes to have the confidence to attack one of those things and to do it. Mike, I can't say enough for most of Jack's inkers, but I really tip my hat to Mike Royer. I mean, he had guts. He still does.
Yeah. The only thing I have to say about this is there's 4 lion characters on the left side of this page. I don't think, do we ever see any of these lions again as other generic guys in the background? They're not the main lion characters. They're just generic rangers and stuff. But if you're an artist and you're going to draw comics and you have 4 background characters and you give them 4 different head positions and 4 different actions going on and 4 different personalities in who they are and what they're saying, you're doing it right. Jack's giving you a little lesson on character and character design and how to write with pictures. Just having that motion from 2 profiles to a 3/4 to a guy looking down at his pipe as he lights it. And it's all just beautiful, wonderful storytelling. And that's what you should do when you drew a cool picture when you're drawing comics. You should just do it like Jack does. That's the
But do
truth.
it your way.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I think we have to end the show.
Oh,
Well,
Okay.
we can't end the show.
I know.
Got the 9-panel
Wonderful
page.
thing.
There's
Badger has
more.
another 2 hours.
all right.
We
should
want to
do
keep
this.
going.
I guess we're gonna have to have a part 2. We're gonna have to have a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, we should do that.
Absolutely.
We talk too much.
You know,
Okay.
we're also
Silver
having a toast to Jack at 7 p.m.
Right.
in the same venue. So if you like to join us on that, Steve Sherman was Jack's assistant back in the 70s and a friend. Bruce Simon was Marvel maniac and underground cartoonist.
He's a maniac, all right.
Mark Badger, comic book artist, scholar, etc. I'm Rand Hoppy from the Kirby Museum. Tom Kraft, president, and thank you everybody so much. It was really great.
Thank you.
It was
Thanks.
a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
really.
Thanks
Good.
for doing this, Rad.
All right, man.
Thanks to the Kirby Museum.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys for being out there and all those
Right.
pictures.
3 days of fun. Here we go.
All right.
Just
All right. Thank you.
Like
Okay,
a
guys.
Republican convention.
Yes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, gang.
Bye, everyone.